Alrighty, guys, Andor Season 2 is right around the corner. And I feel like we've been doing this a lot with a lot of other shows in the MCU or Star Wars or DC. But with these shows come the press tours. And with the press tours come some very interesting revelations that aren't even necessarily related to the shows or projects themselves. I think a lot of the times these people who are making the shows, the creatives, they have insights into other things as well. For example, with Daredevil Born Again, we talked a lot about some things that the showrunners have been saying in terms of other things like Punisher and Daredevil, the previous iterations and the MCU and things like that. So I think that's been really fun. And now Tony Gilroy. Tony Gilroy is the director, is a director, I believe, screenwriter, executive producer, creator of Andor, and he was one of the main creative forces behind Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and its turmoiled creative production, which ended up, I think, with a great film at the very least. So there is that. But I think that Tony Gilroy did a great job with the first season of Andor, which I'm currently rewatching and hoping to get out a revisited segment on the podcast, Andor Season 1 Revisited, by the time Season 2 at least begins its run. We'll see. It might come out a couple weeks after that, but I'm very close to finishing, so hopefully that will come out then. Anyways, all that aside, Andor Season 2 is coming out. The press tour is happening, and Tony Gilroy made a comment, like I said, unrelated to Andor, just in general, because he was asked, I don't know what prompted this question from a person. It almost seems like it was staged, where they asked Tony Gilroy, would you be interested in anything horror related in terms of Star Wars? And horror is not something that Star Wars is generally known for. There are scary elements. I mean, dating all the way back to 1980 with The Empire Strikes Back, I think the scene in the cave was a little frightening, right? In terms of Luke seeing his own face and whatnot. But it wasn't horror, right? It was just more a scary image, right? And so interestingly, this question comes up. And Tony Gilroy, he was doing an interview with Business Insider, and his answer was kind of surprising. It wasn't the cookie cutter, I wish they'd do that, or I'd be excited to see it. This is what his answer is, verbatim, quote, word for word. Quote, they're already doing that. I think they're doing that. I think that's in the works, yeah. Okay, that's it. So, couple things to keep in mind here. Number one, because yes, unlike rumors and unlike unverified sources, this is directly coming from Tony Gilroy. So there's no question about that. Those words, in relation to a question about whether or not Star Wars is developing a horror project and whether or not I think he'd be interested in seeing a Star Wars horror project, this is Tony Gilroy's direct response. So there's no ambiguity about that. I think there is enough room for ambiguity in terms of what he was actually either given the information or what he was trying to say. For example, I may not be surprised to imagine that maybe someone at Lucasfilm was like, oh yeah, we're doing something, and there's some scary elements in something we're doing. And for all we know, what this Lucasfilm person was referring to was Tales of the Underworld, and there's just a scary sequence in it. And that's all they were referring to. And Tony Gilroy took this and very offhandedly just ran with it and said, oh yeah, they're developing something horror related. So for all we know, just to put some caveats out there, that's all that's happening here. Tony Gilroy was given some information that he's just, reporting back, and for all we know that he's misinterpreting what somebody else said. Nobody's fault, right? But he was just asked a question and he answered in the way that he thought was true. However, I mean, the wording is pretty direct, right? So let's move under the assumption that Star Wars is in fact developing a horror project. I mean, I'm not here to speculate on what that could be because it's a galaxy far, far away, and if I could accurately predict what that would be, I think that that's not a good thing, because I think Star Wars should branch out and do all sorts of things in all sorts of different areas and spaces and genres. So I think if I could predict what it was going to be, I think that's a bad sign because it's shrinking the universe once again. I actually think what's more interesting is to go under the premise of, is this a good thing for Star Wars in general, that they're doing a horror-related project? Because Star Wars has never done that before. I mean, they've dabbled in subgenres like mystery and thriller and political espionage with Andor and things like that. And that, but something as distinct as horror, right? Nobody's ever made a Star Wars comedy, even though Star Wars has comedic elements in it, all the way dating back to the original trilogy, but also continuing on. Skeleton Crew, I think, had some really funny moments in there as well. So Star Wars has comedy, but Star Wars has never made a straight-up comedy. I think the MCU has gotten a little closer in that vein, where Ant-Man, I think, is a heist film and a comedy, right? Very, very much more straightforwardly. Although they are superhero films, I think that's sort of the idea there. But I think that's the greater point, and I think that's what makes me so interested and excited about this, is because the MCU provides a model for this, where, yes, they're all superhero movies, for sure. But what is a superhero movie? I mean, superhero movies are not really genres anymore. It's just more of the category of who's in the film, superheroes. But within superhero movies, we've seen over and over again for the past 20 years that superhero movies can be within all these different genres of horror, thriller, action, political espionage, mystery, genre bending, right? And it can be in all these different mediums and all these different genres while still being a superhero film. And it doesn't change in fact, I think it only enhances the fact that they're a part of all these different genres. So actually, I'm excited about this because I think that Star Wars has the opportunity to do the same thing. I think that it may not work for everyone, right? Because when you dive into a genre that's a little bit more niche, and I don't think horror is niche per se, but I'm just as an example, not everyone's going to like it. For example, I'm not a big horror fan myself, but I'm interested because I think that Star Wars needs to be able to explore different pockets of different mediums and different genres. I think Star Wars Visions, well, I don't love Star Wars Visions for me personally. I think it's a great idea, right? I think doing a Star Wars mystery, great idea. I think The Acolyte was trying to be that and it kind of didn't end up being that at all. But I think doing a Star Wars comedy could be an interesting idea, doing a Star Wars mystery, a political thriller in Andor. So I'm actually very excited about this. Just conceptually. Obviously, I'm not going to be thrilled that it's a horror thing. That's just a whole, that's just my own personal opinion. But I think that this is something to monitor. And we'll see. Maybe it comes out. It's announced, in the next couple of months that this project is a Star Wars horror project. And we'll find out more about that. So I'm personally interested to see where this goes from here. Guys, what do you think about Tony Gilroy's comments that Star Wars is developing a horror project? Do you think that this is actually going to happen? Or do you think that maybe he's just misinterpreting something that someone said? Let me know in the comments down below.